Frankenstein is full of descriptions of characters' appearances. Elizabeth, for instance, is described as the beautiful and adored companion of all my occupations and my pleasures in chapter 1. She's physically beautiful and has an inner beauty and purity. Sometimes the two seem to go hand in hand. Outward beauty is an indicator of inner goodness. At the beginning of chapter 4, though, we seem to get a little sign that this judgmental mindset is one that Shelley might want us to question. When Krempe is described on the first page, we're told, "I found in Monsieur Krempe a great deal of sound sense and real information, combined, it is true, with a repulsive physiognomy and manners." Even Victor seems to be realising that you can be ugly and yet have some value as a human being. It's just a shame that he didn't learn his lesson quickly enough, because when the creature comes to life in chapter 5, he doesn't seem to look beyond that yellow skin and those watery eyes. As judgments go, Victor's assessment of his creature is pretty instant. Until he becomes embittered as a result of the way that others treat him, though, the creature seems like a good guy, helping victims, keen to learn, appreciating nature, in fact showing a lot more humanity than most of the humans most of the time. Maybe Shelley is constantly prompting us to question that link between physical appearance and inner reality, and in doing so, exposing the hypocrisy of an image-obsessed 19th century society. Chapter 4 is the chapter where Victor discovers the secret of bestowing animation upon lifeless things. There are 3 things in this chapter that you need to focus on. Firstly, Victor distances himself and isolates himself. He becomes obsessively fixated on his studies, neglecting his family and friends in the process. Victor says, for instance, 2 years passed during which I paid no visit to Geneva, but was engaged heart and soul in the pursuit of some discoveries which I hoped to make. Later, his physical separation from others is emphasised when he says, in a solitary chamber, or rather cell, at the top of the house, and separated from all the other apartments by a gallery and staircase, I kept my workshop of filthy creation. He neglects his family, failing to communicate with them, but hiding himself away and considering his work to be far too important to interrupt. In hindsight, he recognises his faults here when relating this episode in his life to Walton. There's a sense in which this isolation is a sign of his guilt when he says, I shunned my fellow creatures as if I had been guilty of a crime. He is separating himself from humankind and distancing himself from the rhythms of everyday life, like seasons and friends and family, because he is distancing himself from nature. He's doing the unnatural. The second thing about this chapter is the extent to which everything is a secret. The word is used 5 times in this chapter, and Victor, of course, won't tell Walton what the secret is. He says, I will not lead you on, unguarded and ardent as I then was, to your destruction and infallible misery. Learn from me, if not by my precepts, at least by my example, how dangerous is the acquirement of knowledge, and how much happier that man who believes his native town to be the world than he who aspires to become greater than his nature will allow. The reminder that the whole narrative is being relayed by Victor to Walton here allows an imperative, learn from me, giving Shelley perhaps an opportunity to deliver her message in a direct way, that pushing beyond natural parameters or limits is dangerous. The third interesting point in chapter 4 is that it's a kind of calm before the storm. Structurally, look at what is about to happen. The creature is about to come to life. Chapter 5 is where it all happens. Victor's life and the lives of anyone dear to him will never be the same again. So there's a sense of rising tension and foreshadowing in Victor's decline health-wise. Every night he is oppressed by a slow fever and describes himself at the end of the chapter as a wreck. He promises himself exercise and amusement once his labours are complete, but his obsession and his willingness to separate himself from the loving guidance and supervision of family and friends, and his decision to push beyond natural boundaries in scientific discovery, have made their mark on him physically and mentally. The deterioration we see in Victor here, the result of his flaws, is a sign of his downfall. Shelley uses lots of words from the semantic fields of sin and disease in the final paragraph of the chapter. Withered, anxiety, fever, nervous, painful, guilty, crime and disease. Victor is on the verge of success on one level. He says, every day showed me plainly how well I had succeeded. But the end of his experiment, of course, will mark the unleashing of horror and misery. His creation, the result of his discovery of the secret of life, will ultimately lead only to death.